nice lunch, nice break. So we just have an hour and a half left. And I thought that because I do like to try to make things practical, and I think there are ways we can use the idea of emptiness in a practical way, like in our life, to reduce our disturbing emotions, painful mental experiences and problems with people and so forth. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about that. Then we could do a meditation to see how that could be done. Then we'll see if there's any final questions that you want to ask before we finish. So like I mentioned this morning, one way of understanding emptiness is that it means that things don't exist independently. So they say, actually, you've probably heard this term, dependent arising or dependent origination, which is kind of a long phrase, but it simply means that whatever exists depends on other things. Nothing is independent. Nothing exists independently. So this is actually, like the Dalai Lama sometimes says, with regard to Buddhist teachings we can talk about view, conduct, and I forget what the third one is. Maybe it's just two. Anyway, he says the view, in other words, the world view, the way of explaining things, in Buddhism can be boiled down to dependent arising or dependent origination, which simply means, again, things are dependent on other things. Nothing stands by itself. Nothing is completely autonomous, independent of everything else, but everything is interdependent, dependent and interdependent. So he says that's the Buddhist view, and then the conduct in Buddhism is compassion, acting in a compassionate way towards others. Does anyone remember if there's a third thing? Well, action and conduct is the same.
Oh, it's the same. Okay, yeah, right.
Maybe meditation. Sometimes they say view, meditation, and action. So meditation would be, I don't remember what he said, but yeah, we could probably say calm abiding and special insight. Anyway, so this is something that Dalai Lama often talks about, that the Buddhist view of things is that of interdependent origination or dependent origination. So dependent origination then means whatever exists depends on other things for its existence. And then there's emptiness. Emptiness of inherent existence, or emptiness of independent existence. We could also say objective existence and so on. So those two things are completely compatible. They don't contradict each other. Instead, they're mutually supportive. They support each other. And actually, Lama Tsong Khapa says that when we develop a view of emptiness, when we work on understanding emptiness, meditating on emptiness, realizing emptiness, the correct understanding of emptiness should be such that it's completely compatible, completely, compatible? Not opposing, not contradictory with dependent origination. So those two things are like two sides of a coin. Also, we can say those two things are like the two truths, ultimate truth and conventional truth. Emptiness is the ultimate truth, and dependent origination is the conventional truth, the way things exist on a conventional level. So, so it said that one approach to understanding emptiness is to meditate on dependent origination. This is actually, you may have heard this expression, they say, this is the king of reasonings. Some people say that. That dependent origination is actually a reason for emptiness, a way that you can prove emptiness to yourself, come to an experience of emptiness, come to realize emptiness by understanding how things exist dependently. And then that is said to be the king of reasons, because there's actually other reasons as well, other reasonings that you can use, which get kind of complicated. I won't go into those. But this is said to be the king of reasonings, and my understanding is the reason it's said to be that is because when you use dependent origination as your reason for understanding emptiness, then there's less chance that you will fall into nihilism. Because when you're meditating on how things exist dependent on other things, that sort of supports the conventional existence of things. We're not denying that things exist. We're not saying nothing exists. Things do exist. How do they exist? In dependence on other things. So that, that's makes it easier to understand emptiness without falling into nihilism, without making that mistake. So anyway, this is one way of deepening our understanding of emptiness is by thinking about how things are dependent. And traditionally, it said there's three basic ways that things are dependent on other things. One is causes and conditions. Things are dependent on causes and conditions. You want me to put this on the board? Or you can write it down. Why not? Use Gun's board. Well, maybe I'll use the board instead of the paper, otherwise save some trees. Okay, so the one way that things are dependent is they are dependent on causes and conditions. So that, a table is made from wood and using various tools, and then there's a carpenter and so on. So causes and conditions that brought the table into existence. The book, again, from paper and ink and machinery and so forth. The flower comes from seed and water and soil and so forth. Our bodies come from our parents' bodies. So there's many examples of how things come from causes and conditions. Now this way of dependence applies to impermanent things, impermanent phenomena. Whatever is an impermanent phenomena always comes from causes and conditions. Those are actually like two things that are totally compatible. If it's impermanent, it comes from causes and conditions. If it comes from causes and conditions, it's impermanent. So whatever is an impermanent phenomena, so all the material things in the world, our bodies, and what about our mind? What about the mind? Is the mind impermanent or permanent?
Oh.
Both. Oh. Actually, it's not possible to be both.
But maybe the emptiness of the mind is...
No, the emptiness of the mind isn't the mind.
No.
Yeah, mind is an impermanent phenomena. So if it's an impermanent phenomenon, it must come from causes and conditions. So what are the causes and conditions of the mind?
Previous mind.
Yeah. So the mind is like a stream, like a river, constantly changing moment by moment by moment. So the earlier states of mind, earlier moments of mind, are the causes for the later ones. They transform into later moments of mind. But that's not the only causes and conditions. Also, there can be external causes and conditions. For example, one experience we have is seeing. When we look at the white wall, we see We have this experience of seeing the white wall. So the wall is one of the conditions of that mind. If the wall wasn't there, we wouldn't have the experience of seeing the wall. So the object that we see is also a condition. It's not the main cause, but it's a condition, a contributory cause for our mind. So there are many factors that can that are causes and conditions for the mind. So whatever is an impermanent phenomena, we can find causes and conditions that gave rise to it, and therefore impermanent phenomena are not independent because they depend on their causes and conditions. If the causes and conditions weren't there, those phenomena wouldn't be there. So that's one. That's not difficult to understand, right? That's pretty easy. Little kids can understand that. And then the second way that things are dependent is parts. And this is true both for impermanent phenomena and permanent phenomena. So that means, because according to Buddhism, whatever exists, whatever there is either one of these. Either it's impermanent or it's permanent. It can't be both, and it also can't be neither. You can't find anything that isn't either permanent or impermanent. So these are said to be a dichotomy. There's this term dichotomy. Dichotomy means two things in which everything exists. Dichotomy. Do you know that word? It's a word that's used sometimes in Buddhist philosophy. It must be used in Western philosophy as well.
Dichotomy.
Yeah. So these two are dichotomy in the sense that they cover all phenomena. All phenomena can be divided into these two, permanent and impermanent. So that means all phenomena, whether it's permanent or impermanent, is dependent on parts. So with impermanent phenomena, that's not difficult to understand. A table has parts, a book has parts, our body has parts, so it's easy to see the parts. Mind has parts. You can divide up the mind into different facets, different experiences of mind, different aspects of mind, like primary minds, mental factors. So this is something you study in Lorik mind. Now with permanent phenomena, how do permanent phenomena have parts? That's a little more difficult. What's an example of a permanent phenomenon?
Space, you said.
Space.
Emptiness.
Let's start with space. How does space have parts?
Well, space over there and space over there.
Yeah, right.
But it depends on where you are.
Well, I know, but you can still say space in the back of the room, space in the front of the room, the space inside this glass, the space inside another glass, and so forth. So, yeah, there's lots of different kinds of space, different instances or different examples of space. So those are the parts of space. And then emptiness, another example of a permanent phenomenon is emptiness. So how does emptiness have parts?
Perhaps, like you said, the emptiness depends on the object which is empty, so like the emptiness of this or that cup or something.
Right. The emptiness of this glass, the emptiness of that glass, the emptiness of me, the emptiness of you. So there's many different kinds of emptiness. So emptiness is actually a plural thing. Not just like there's one emptiness pervading everything, but each phenomena that exists has its own emptiness, its own, its emptiness. So those are different parts of emptiness. So, yeah, so even permanent phenomena have parts. Can you think of anything, any phenomena that doesn't have parts? Well, what's the difference between consciousness and mind? said consciousness. Oh, you did. Okay. Yeah, actually, consciousness is used interchangeably with mind. It's another term for mind. So.
What about void?
Huh?
What about void?
Void. Well, what's void?
Does it have parts?
What
It
is
was
it?
just a suggestion.
I know, but we have to. There has to be a basis for that label, void. What's the basis for void?
Sometimes they call it emptiness, voidness.
Yeah, I mean, some translators use
Yeah.
voidness as an alternative to emptiness. The term in Sanskrit is shunyata. Shunyata. So some translators translate shunyata as voidness, but it's voidness rather than void.
What about stillness?
Or elements.
Stillness. What is stillness?
How about love or like feelings? Do they have parts?
Air, water.
Well, what is love? What kind of phenomena is it?
Is it kind of feeling types or qualities?
So it's mind?
Yeah.
You have love for your mother, love for your father, love for your child, love for your brother.
What about universal love?
Well, even there, I mean, like they say a Buddha, and Buddha has universal love for every living being. So I would think you could say the Buddha's love for one being and the Buddha's love for another being. I mean, it's all love in the sense that it's the same kind of feeling, but still, because of the object is different. The object of that love is different. So then the love itself could be said to be different. Just like we say, different objects have an emptiness. Each object has an emptiness. So we can talk about different emptinesses. So I think we could talk about different loves. Anyway, something to think about. And then there's a third way that things are dependent, and that is on, how do we call it? Just say mental labeling. Mental labeling. Sorry, my writing isn't very good. It's also hard to write down low like that. So, this third way of things depending is difficult. The first two are not so difficult to understand, but the third one is very difficult to understand. And in fact, it's said that to really understand that one, we first have to understand emptiness. So we're not going to worry too much about that right now. But that just means that, like for example, the book, earlier we were trying to find the book. We were trying to find something we could point to as being the book, a findable, point-outable thing. That is the book there. So we weren't able to find that. Well, I wasn't, maybe you could, but when we really do try to search for the book, we can't find such a thing that we can point to and say, that is the book there. And yet the book does exist. We read books, we buy books, we sell books, we make books, we write books. So books do exist, but how do they exist? So the answer to that is they exist by being merely labeled, meaning that we have a collection of parts, pages, ink, paper, cover, glue. So there's a basis, the basis of imputation, and the basis of designation, basis of labeling, so the basis there. Then in relation to that, we say book. We give the name, the label book. You label book. And this process of labeling is dependent on the mind. Yeah? I mean, books don't label themselves. Chairs don't label themselves. So it's minds of sentient beings that do this labeling process. So, so mind, and in particular conceptual mind. Because like visual consciousness, eye consciousness doesn't label. So the kind of mind that labels is conceptual mind. So conceptual mind, and through a process of language, in the case of human beings, through the interaction of these phenomena, then labeling happens. Book, this is a book, this is a glass, this is a microphone, this is a pen, this is this, this is that. This is Martin, this is Eva, this is Gun, and so forth. So through that process of conceptual mind, conceptualizing and coming up with a name or a label is given to an object. So then that object, to be a book, for this to be a book, depends on that process of labeling. If there was no process of labeling, saying this is a book, it wouldn't be a book. What do you think?
It somehow starts with a concept also, because the first book did someone come up with the idea, then put together, and then everyone sort of agrees.
Inventing. Sometimes it's like that, but what about things in nature?
Then it's not like that.
Yeah. So, of course, with things produced by people, then, usually a building, for example, an architect thinks of building a building in a certain way. So then it's like first built in his mind or her mind, conceptually, and then drawn on paper, and then actualized. So yeah, a lot of things start with a concept and then become manifest, become like physical. But no, that isn't true for everything. Things that
Mountains.
a tree. Although the Christians say God, they came from the mind of God. God created trees. But yeah. So this third way of things being dependent applies again to everything, both impermanent phenomena and permanent phenomena. So whatever exists is dependent on mental labeling.
Can you please say again, how are permanent things also empty?
Well, the first of these doesn't apply to permanent things, because they don't depend on causes and conditions. They don't arise from causes and conditions. But the second and the third apply to permanent things. Permanent things have parts. They are dependent on their parts. If the parts were taken away, then that phenomena wouldn't exist. So that's the way they are dependent on parts. And the third one, mental labeling. Yeah, this is an interesting point, because sometimes people think emptiness must be truly existing, inherently existing. Emptiness is the ultimate truth, the ultimate reality. It's real, it's true. So it has to be inherently existing. I mean, people do think that way. Great masters of the past have thought that way. It's not a stupid idea. So it's possible to think that emptiness itself is inherently existing. But emptiness is also empty of inherent existence. Why? Because it exists in dependence on other things. It depends on its parts, and it also depends on mental labeling. We label emptiness. Emptiness is labeled by the mind. On the basis of imputation. What's the basis of imputation? Of emptiness?
Emptiness.
Yeah, we can say all the different emptinesses, like on this table there's all these different objects. Each one has an emptiness. Okay? So there's a whole bunch of emptinesses. All phenomena in the universe have emptiness as their ultimate mode of existence. So on the basis of all of those emptinesses, we give the label emptiness. So it's also dependent on mental labeling. It is also dependent on the basis, like we were talking before. You know, the emptiness of an object is dependent on that object. The emptiness of this pen depends on the pen. If the pen wasn't there, its emptiness wouldn't be there. Emptiness doesn't exist independently by itself.
So if we don't exist, emptiness doesn't exist.
Right. When I die, when Sangye Khadro dies, the emptiness of Sangye Khadro also doesn't die, but goes out of existence. But there's always emptiness, because there's always something else that's empty. So emptiness itself, emptiness itself will never go out of existence. And emptiness itself has emptiness. There's the emptiness of emptiness.
Which is also empty.
Which is also empty. Emptiness, it's infinite. Emptiness, there's emptiness, the emptiness of the pen, and there's the emptiness of the emptiness of the pen, and then there's the emptiness of the emptiness of the emptiness of the pen.
Why do they stop at 16 and they talk about 16 emptinesses?
Oh, that's a different thing.
That's a different thing, okay.
No, but the 16 emptiness, there's 16, there's 18, there's 20, there's different enumerations of emptiness. But there, it said that emptiness itself is always the same kind of phenomena. It's always the same, but we can talk about different emptinesses from the point of view of different objects. Yeah? So, like in this room there are 20 people or something. So because of the 20 different people in this room, we can talk about the 20 emptinesses of the 20 people in this room. So from the point of view of the basis of emptiness, the thing which is empty, then we can talk about different emptinesses. They say emptiness itself is always the same in the sense that it, like sugar. You have a bag full of sugar, which means lots of little grains of sugar, but each grain of sugar has exactly the same taste. Every grain of sugar tastes sweet. So whether you taste this grain or that grain or that grain, they all have the same taste. So in a similar way, emptiness is said to always have the same taste. When you realize one emptiness, it's exactly the same as another emptiness.
What taste is that?
Bliss.
Indescribable. Indescribable. They do say the taste of emptiness or the experience of emptiness is really something that cannot be described in words. You have to taste it yourself. It's just like, I mean, it's the same with sugar. How do you describe the taste of sugar? You have to taste it yourself, so then you know.
I must ask, whatever you call it, I mean, that stream of consciousness that reincarnates, is it permanent or is it impermanent? Is it empty or not empty? I mean, that's something which, you know, carries from life to life. Is it permanent or impermanent? Is it empty or not empty?
Well, it's consciousness, it's mind, that's the nature of it. But again, mind is many different things. So it's, you know, a certain type of mind, not all of our minds, but a certain type of mind that goes from one life to the next.
Yeah.
And because it's mind, it's impermanent. The nature of mind is impermanent in the sense of changing all the time. But there's a special kind of thing about mind, because even though it's impermanent in the sense that it's changing every moment, every moment, every moment, every moment, but it's eternal in the sense that it will never cease to exist.
Yeah.
So it depends on what you mean by permanent. If you think of permanent as being lasting forever, then mind does exist in that way. But we don't usually use the word permanent in that sense. Usually we could say eternal or everlasting or without end.
Yeah, so that is still the Buddhist belief that there is something, that quality. There is that quality also.
Yeah, but they say there's some in the Theravada tradition, some Buddhists of the Theravada tradition, who say that when a person attains nirvana, or they attain enlightenment, then they pass away, their mind ceases. So there are some Buddhists, well, I shouldn't say they are Buddhists, yes, they are Buddhists, but they have that view that the mind can cease to exist. But the Mahayanists say, no, that doesn't make any sense. Because they say, for example, a Buddha is somebody who spent lifetimes, eons, developing bodhicitta, love, compassion, practicing the 6 perfections, accumulating all this merit with the motivation of wanting to become a Buddha to help all living beings. So after spending all that huge amount of time, and then becoming a Buddha, and then teaching for a few years, and then going out of existence, doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense at all. Does it? Yeah?
Yeah,
So anyway, they say that, no, it isn't like that. So the mind lasts forever. So eventually all of us are going to become enlightened, and our mind will just continue existing as an enlightened mind. It doesn't go out of existence.
because I've been thinking, maybe that is very similar, maybe that is what the Christians label soul. Maybe that's the same thing. They label it soul, and they have different explanations, but it's kind of a bit similar, because we as Buddhists also have this going on forever, permanent in one way.
Continuation after
Yeah,
that.
we both religions, really, there is
something similar, but still I think you have to examine when the Christians talk about a soul, what do they mean? What is this thing called soul? And I was thinking something that's kind of funny. You know the movie Ghost?
Yes.
No.
Yeah?
haven't seen.
Anyway, there are other movies as well that are about ghosts, and there's this sort of tendency that to think that when a person dies, after somebody dies, there is this kind of soul coming out. And the way it's depicted, like in movies, it looks just like the person. Right? Like in the movie Ghost, you know? The guy dies, his body's lying there on the ground, then you see this kind of transparent image coming out, which looks just like him. Yeah? I mean, I know this is just popular depiction, but still I think in our minds we probably do have that kind of conception that, you know, after somebody dies, there is this invisible entity which looks just like him, and that goes to heaven, or that, because like, I don't know, when I was a kid, being brought up in Catholicism, I think we were actually taught that after death we will be united in heaven with all our relatives. Right? My mother will be there, my father will be there, my brother will be there, you know? So there's this kind of a sense of a permanent permanent person who's going to go to heaven and have a good time. And I mean, maybe, I don't know if Christian theologians would actually explain it in that way. Maybe this is more the common, ordinary kind of conception of ordinary people. But still, that's what I'm just saying. We need to kind of examine what they mean by soul, as opposed to what the Buddhists say. Because according to Buddhism, like when I die, some very subtle part of my mind is going to separate from this body and then take another life. And once that goes into another life, another body, maybe I'll be an elephant in my next life. So then I'll develop a completely different I. I'll identify myself as an elephant with this long trunk and flappy ears and jumping in the river. So I have a completely different sense of self, or I, than this one. So depending on the body we're born into, the circumstances, parents, environment, we develop a completely different sense of self, or I. So there isn't a permanent self, a kind of continuation of the same self that I am now into the future. So that may be one
Maybe
difference.
some small reason, I don't know. I mean, I think about reincarnation lamas, what about them?
But still, I remember Lama Zopa, who's recognized the reincarnation of Lama Yeshe. He would sometimes say, I'm not Lama Yeshe, I'm Zopa. Because I think people, like the disciples of Lama Yeshe, I think were kind of, having this expectation that he's going to be just like the previous one, And I can't help but feel that he was kind of like trying to reject that idea. I'm a different person. So there's a continuation of the mind, of the consciousness from one life to the next, but still it is a different person. Different body, different environment, different circumstances, even a different way of thinking. Obviously Lama Zopa has come out quite different in some ways than Lama Yeshe. So some things are carried over.
Yeah,
and also they say like qualities, like in one lifetime if a person develops a lot of compassion, is very, very compassionate, then you'll see that quality in the next life as well. So qualities can be carried over, but still the identity, personality, the way of being of the person will be different. That's my understanding, but that's very limited. Okay, let's do a meditation to see if we can use these ideas in a helpful way. So what I'm going to do, just to warn you, I'm going to ask you to think of someone you have problems with, a difficult person towards whom you get annoyed or even angry, irritated. And then I'm going to take you through a kind of analysis of this person to try to see how this person doesn't exist inherently or independently because they are dependent on things for their existence. And then we'll just check to see if thinking about this, contemplating this, may have an effect on our way of seeing this person and relating to this person. So first of all, make sure that you're sitting comfortably and try to keep your back straight, but at the same time let your body be relaxed, not tense. So try to let go of any tension there may be anywhere in your body. And just check your mind to see if your mind is here or has gone somewhere else, maybe already home or your next destination. So try to put aside any thoughts of other places, other times, like the future or the past. Bring your mind back here. Try to keep your mind here in the present and focused on the meditation that we're doing. So bring to mind a person that you have difficulty with, in the sense of experiencing unpleasant or negative feelings towards this person. It could be anger, it could be irritation, it could be like criticalness, judgmentalness. However, I think it's better not to think of your worst enemy, someone who's hurt you very much, or towards whom you have strong hatred. Because if you bring that person to mind, your mind might get out of control and just get caught up in anger. So we don't want that to happen. We want to be able to work with our mind, our emotions, not be overwhelmed by them. So it might be better to think of someone towards whom your feelings are more mild, not so strong. And it doesn't have to be somebody you know. It could be somebody like a public figure, like a politician, a celebrity, someone in the news that you find kind of annoying or irritating. And if there's many people you feel that way about, just choose one. And it's good to have a mental picture of that person. You can visualize the person in front of you, or you can just imagine wherever they may be right now. And see if you can recognize how this person appears to your mind, how they appear to be inherently existing or independently existing, like something very real, concrete, objectively existing, coming from their own side, like really annoying, really difficult from their side, coming from there to you, to your mind, kind of like throwing themselves at your mind and forcing you to feel irritated or upset about this person. So now let's contemplate how this person is dependent, the different ways that this person exists dependently or interdependently. Starting with the first one, which is dependent on causes and conditions. So right now this person is probably an adult, fully grown, and it may seem as though they've been that way all along. They were always like that. But we know, if we think about it, that that isn't true. Because everybody starts off as a little baby. So try to imagine that. And that once upon a time, this person was a tiny baby. Small little baby in their mother's arms. Probably quite cute. Adorable. Usually when we see a baby we feel, oh, how sweet, how nice. We don't usually feel disgusted or annoyed. Try to imagine this person as a little baby. And then as time went on, this little baby grew bigger and bigger, became a little child, playing, running around, sometimes getting upset, crying, having the usual difficulties that children have. And we can also think that it's possible that the way the person is now, which we find difficult, or we criticize them, we don't like certain things about them. So it's possible that that way of being that they are now is dependent on certain experiences they had as a child, with their parents. Maybe they had difficult experiences at home with their parents, with their family. And it's because of those experiences they had as a child that they developed into the person they are today, who we find difficult. I'm trying to get a sense of how this person has gone through many changes, starting from the time it was born, he or she was born, small baby, and then growing up with their family, and then at school, and then with friends, at work, and so forth. So they had many experiences and went through many changes up to this present time, the way they are now. And so the way they are now is dependent on all those previous experiences, those previous instances of their life. And if you can accept past lives and karma, then that's something else to consider. Even before this life, this person was in another life, and before that another life. And so they already started off this life with a lot of imprints from their past lives, their past experiences. And those karmic imprints from the past also had an effect on the way they are now. And also think that they're continuing to change every moment. The person isn't something permanent, frozen, fixed. They're changing moment by moment, hour by hour, day by day. So they will continue going through many changes from this moment on. So that gives us a sense of how the person is dependent on causes and conditions, which also means the person is impermanent, subject to change, rather than something permanent and solid, frozen. So now let's think about the second meaning of dependence, that they are dependent on parts. So this person isn't something whole and indivisible and partless, but they're made up of many parts. So we can start with the body, just mentally contemplate all the different parts of their body, such as skin, bones, blood, organs, muscles. You can also think of the subtler parts like cells, molecules, atoms. Try to see the person's body as made up of billions of different parts. And the other main part of the person is their mind. And that too is made up of parts. For example, over time, moment by moment, there are different experiences in the person's mind, different thoughts, feelings, emotions, and so forth. Each moment their mind is changing. That means each moment it's like they have a different mind, different experiences. And none of those parts of their mind is something permanent, fixed, frozen, but it's more like little sparks, mental sparks, appearing and disappearing, or bubbles. Experiences arising like bubbles and then popping, disappearing. So there's nothing permanent and fixed in the person's mind. Let's try to get a sense of the third way of depending, which is on mental labeling. When this person first came into the world, he or she didn't have a name. The person wasn't born saying, "I am so-and-so." But whatever name they have was given by their parents. So the parents thought of a nice name, a name that they liked, and then they put that name, or they gave that name to their child, a baby. And the baby came to be known by that name, and as the child grew up, they came to think, "I am that, I am so-and-so." So the person then is just labeled, just named, whatever their name may be. But they don't exist that way from their own side. Inherently, from their own side, they are not that person, that name. we can contemplate this is that we might have our own label of this person. We might think this person is an idiot, stupid, bad, an enemy, a troublemaker. So this is something else we can contemplate. So our mind projects those labels, those kind of bad names, insulting names onto this person, but do they exist that way from their own side? Is this person like really, truly a jerk, an idiot, a bad person, a crook, or whatever label we might give? If they did exist that way, from their own side, inherently, then everybody would see them that way. It would be as though they're walking around with a sign on their forehead saying, I'm a crook, I'm an idiot. And everybody would immediately think, yes, this person is a crook, this person is an idiot. But if we investigate that, it's not true. It's not like that. The person appears that way to us. We put that label on them. But not everybody does that. There are probably people who really like this person, who think of this person as a friend, a loved one, a dear one. For example, we could think of this person's mother. So mothers usually love their children, even if their children are crooks, are criminals, murderers. Mothers still see something lovable in their children. They still see their children as dear. So try to imagine that. Try to imagine the person's mother, father, or other people who see this person in a different way than you, who see this person as lovable, as dear. Then our mind might come up with the objection. We might think, well, anybody who thinks this person is dear is stupid, is blind, doesn't know the person. So then we could think about the Buddha. If you can accept the existence of Buddhas, enlightened beings, who have unconditional love and compassion for everybody, for every living being, and see everybody as dear, just as a mother sees her little baby as very dear and precious. So try to imagine how this person appears in the mind of a Buddha. Does a Buddha see this person as an idiot, somebody bad, somebody stupid, an enemy, horrible? So finally, just focus your mind once more on that person and just see if there's been any change, any shift in your mind, the way that person appears to your mind. The way they appear to your mind now compared to the beginning of the meditation. feel ready to come out of the meditation, you can slowly open your eyes, relax, change your position if you need to. So in case you didn't see any change in your mind, don't worry. Realistically, it takes time to change our mind, and just doing one meditation on this subject may not be enough. So don't give up, and maybe you could try it again on your own, in your own time, in your own way, and just see. And like I said, realistically, it could take a number of times, a number of sessions of thinking in this way before we see some change in our mind. So we shouldn't expect that changing our mind can happen quickly, instantly. It does take time. But do you think that's helpful? Do you think that way of thinking is helpful? So I asked you to think of an example of someone towards whom you have like anger or irritation, but you could use it for other people, like if you're just madly in love with somebody or totally obsessed with somebody, and you realize that you're going over the top, like you know, not seeing this person in a realistic way. That's kind of an unhealthy feeling. So you could also. You do the same meditation, you know, thinking about the different ways this person is dependent. And also not just with people, with objects. Yeah, any kind of object that we might get emotionally afflicted about. If we want to reduce the strength of the emotion, then this is something we can do. Because they do say that meditating on emptiness is actually the best antidote, the best remedy to any of our disturbing emotions. But it is difficult to meditate on emptiness. But I think this way, meditating on dependence, the ways in which the person or object is dependent and therefore not independent, it is getting us closer to an understanding of emptiness, even though it may not lead to a full realization of emptiness, but at least we're going in that direction, and it is helping us have a better understanding of this. And by the way, it helps us reduce the emotions. The emotions will cool down. So it is, I think, a very helpful, very practical method to use. Any questions? Was there anything about this explanation you didn't understand or want to know more about?
For some weeks I've been terribly angry with our company called Monsanto.
Why? Why should you be angry at them?
And yesterday I had a discussion with Gunnar here one. So there is a lot of persons though. So I made an image of, I don't know any of them by face. So I made a Monsanto face. I feel a little bit better. Not that terribly angry yet. So, good medicine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I found this helpful some years ago. I guess it was 2003 when the Iraq War started. And I happened to be in America at that time. I was living in San Francisco, and so I was kind of in the middle of all the discussion and debate and demonstrations and so forth. So I was really upset when they finally made the decision to start the war. And I blamed Bush. It was all his fault. I was so angry at him. But then I thought about, wait a minute, is he really the solely to blame for this situation? And I thought, no, wait a minute. There's a lot of other people. Probably his father. Mother, maybe. Yeah, friends, his cabinet. I guess that's what they call it, the advisors and secretaries and generals, of course. So there's probably a whole bunch of people around him who are also, yes, we have to do this, and so on. And then, of course, the American people themselves. There was a huge number, even, I think it was, I don't remember the exact polls, but a majority, I think, a majority of the people of America who wanted this war. So he just happened to be the person sitting in the White House with the label president, merely labeled president. And so thinking in that way, thinking that there's so many other people, so many other factors, so many causes and conditions leading to this, really helped to cool down, dissipate the anger.
Unless it's just putting the anger, diluting the anger onto other people, which doesn't
No,
diminish the anger.
not really.
I mean, most people, that's the way they operate in general. I think a lot of people.
No, it didn't have that effect on me. Because something else I thought about as well that was helpful. I thought that if I was in that position, if I was the president, and if I made the decision not to go to war, there would probably be a lot of people angry at me, blaming me, and thinking I was doing the wrong thing, right? So it really did make me wonder. It really did make me wonder, well, is there such a thing as the right thing or the wrong thing? It's often very difficult. I mean, I'm always opposed to war and violence and killing and so forth. So I think history has shown that war was a disaster. But sometimes it is hard to know if there is a right thing or a wrong thing. And then there's also karma. I mean, this whole world and everything that's happening in this world is the product of our karma, our collective karma. So we all have a role to play in what happens in this world. If our karma was really pure, we wouldn't be here. We would be somewhere else. Like in our studies, we learned about these other realms called the form realms and the formless realms, where you are born as a result of developing concentration and really kind of improving your concentration more and more. Then you get born in those realms. And they say in the formless realms they don't even have bodies, so of course they can't kill each other. But even in the form realms, there's no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no crime. They don't even get angry. They don't even have anger. So for me that was really helpful, to think, well, why am I here and not there? Why do I have to be in this world where these horrible things happen and not in a world where there is no war, no killing, and no crime? So putting the blame out there, like it's all their fault, I'm completely innocent, that's not a correct view. So, yeah, this is all like different ways of thinking about dependent arising, how things arise, how things come into existence, independence on so many different factors. And I am one of those factors. Not that I did it by choice or deliberately, but my karma purified my karma enough to be in a different situation.
Can I just ask
Yeah.
one thing? This thing about form and formless realms. Say if form realm, I don't really know what it is, but say if there is everything is kind of peaceful there, that's just a state of mind. So somebody could be in here, being in the formless, a form realm, or that's my question. Or is it a special place?
Yeah, it is said that there are actual places where you can be born. Beings are born in that place. But before you can be born in that place, you have to develop that state of mind. What's like in the form realm, they're called the four concentrations.
Oh yeah.
And to be born in any of those four, you have to develop those concentrations. To be born in the first concentration, which is the first of the four form realms, you have to develop the first concentration. So there's a whole process. It's jhana in Sanskrit.
Oh yeah.
Jhana or Pali, no. The Pali word is jhana, and the Sanskrit word is jhana. For those who are interested. So yeah, you have to develop that state of mind. So if you have a human body, you can be a human being and develop that particular state of mind, then when you're meditating and your mind is in that state, your mind is in that realm. It's said that mind is a form realm mind. It's a form realm mind. So your body is in the desire realm. This is called the desire realm. The mind is in the form realm. Something like that. So I don't completely understand.
The hell then, hell's these places, but that's just a state of mind, or?
Well, I don't know. I mean, yeah. I don't know. They do say there are actual places.
But isn't that more in the traditional teachings?
I do hope.
I mean, but they also do say there can be hell beings around us. So there could be hell beings here or preta beings here in the same world as us. We just don't see them. But they are having experiences, hell-like experiences or preta-like experiences in our world. So, I don't know. I'm not sure. But then on the other hand, Shantideva says that where does hell come from? Where do all these horrible things in hell come from? They come from the mind. They're created by the mind. So, yeah, I think for many Western people it's more helpful to think that way, that your mind, certain states of mind, certain activities of mind put you into that kind of realm.
I was just, because they also say that to a Buddha, this is a pure realm. So, I mean, or a Bodhisattva in hell wouldn't experience the hell realm. But I don't know how that would work either.
I don't either. Don't ask me. But yeah, I mean, but then it fits with this whole thing of mental labeling. Yeah, due to our karma, according to our karma, we see things in different ways. I mean, they use this example. It comes in the teachings of like this a glass of liquid, and a human being sees it as water, something nice, cool, clean, drinkable. But a hungry ghost, a preta, if a preta was standing here looking at this, a preta would see it as something really filthy and disgusting, and pus and blood and yuck. It's the same thing, but appearing differently to that hungry ghost because of the karma. The karma and the hungry ghost causes it to see it in that way. Then a god, like a deva, who has a more pure mind, more pure karma, seeing the same glass of liquid, sees it as nectar. Nectar of the gods. Like, oh, blissful, delicious, oh. You know, just completely filling them with bliss. And that's due to their karma. So the same object can appear in different ways to different beings according to our karma. So that fits completely with this thing that things don't exist inherently and independently. If the water was inherently existing or independently existing, then everybody would have to see it in the same way. But that isn't the case. So that's because of the process of mental labeling by the mind. Independence on some basis of imputation, the mind will label it. And this thing about mental labeling, it doesn't mean that we kind of deliberately or consciously label it. Like the preta, I'm sure the preta would prefer seeing it as water or nectar than pus and blood. You know, it doesn't deliberately choose to label it as pus and blood, but it's the karma. The karma is so strong, so overwhelming that it's forced to see it in that way. And we probably would also like to see it like nectar, blissful nectar. But you know, our karma is such that we are kind of forced to see it as water, which isn't so bad, but could be better.
But when we know that we can perceive things differently, and that would be dependent on our karma, can't we train to see, oh, this is just a state of mind, this is just a position, this is just a pair of glasses. So the karma doesn't go on and on and on. I can, if I know these things, I can also use the knowledge as a tool to say, oh, this could be a glass of pus, but this could be soma. And see what happens.
I mean, that's
mentally do that.
Yeah, that's in Tantra. This is what one does. You actually have practices where you visualize everything in a completely different way, in a more pure way, and you train your mind to see things in that way, and that becomes one cause for you to actually attain the state of a Buddha and the experiences of a Buddha. So definitely. I mean, in the beginning it's kind of artificial. In the beginning it's contrived, we say contrived, fabricated. But by doing it again and again and again, and working on other things as well, you also have to have a realization of emptiness and bodhicitta and so on. But a combination of all these factors does eventually bring you to the point where you really do see it as nectar. It really does become nectar for you.
I think even if we don't get to that stage, but for instance, someone serves us rice 3 days in a row, the third day we're still having rice, instead of saying, oh, I'm so lucky to have this delicious rice, it's clean, it's good, it's going to help my body, many people don't even have this to eat, and feel satisfied with what we have, then every day becomes so much more pleasant.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's difficult to get to that point even.
Or the other example they say is that so-called enemies, difficult people we find really annoying and irritating, and we wish that they would disappear from the planet. In the teachings it said these people are actually very helpful for us. These are like teachers, teaching us patience, giving us the chance to really work on our patience and overcome our anger and increase our love and compassion. So these are actually really helpful people for us. So you work on that, you work on that kind of practice, and you can actually get to the point where a difficult person comes into your life and you think, oh, wonderful, this person is great. Yeah.
I was thinking this about the glass again. Just not so long ago, Lama Zopa, when he was in Singapore, they were sending on the internet so I could see. And then he was just talking about that, and I've always had trouble with merit, somehow that Tibet, I mean, this,
merit,
the term. And then he said, not it was their karma, he said it's their lack of merit. It's depending on their merits, how they see the glass. So those who have a lot of merits see it as nectar, and those who lack a lot of merits see it as blood and pus. This is how he put it that time. Because of lack of merits, depending on, or that you have a lot of merits.
Yeah, I mean, I think there could be different ways of explaining it, but this comes up in Chandrakirti's Madhyamika Avatar. He uses this example.
Yeah, I know.
And there he explains it as the force of karma. It's like we are forced by our karma. Karma is so strong, it kind of forces us to see it like that.
Yeah, well, there
That
must be a
shows-
connection between
Yeah,
merit
I
and
just
karma,
thought
of
it
course.
was-
The
Sure,
karma
sure.
is
It's
So
not
lack of
connected.
merit is lack of positive karma.
Yeah.
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 And an excessive, not so good karma.
But if this seems to be practical advice to deal with this life, this state of reality, but then it's also interesting to go beyond that. I mean, it doesn't really matter if I see that as a piece of glass of juice or glass of water or glass of soma. What's interesting is that which is beyond. The mind itself, it seems to be the mind everything. So that, is it possible to practice toward that, exactly as I can practice to see okay, that is,
Kolla spisen.
I see that, just a phenomenon, I just see that way, and then I see that way, and I mean, I can dance around with that. But that which is, or that produces seeing, or I don't know how to name it. Isn't it there? We should train.
Yeah.
Also.
Well, I mean, what we're trying to do ultimately is to reach the state of a Buddha, the mind of a Buddha. So the mind of a Buddha would see, I mean, it's said that the Buddha always sees the emptiness of things. The Buddha always sees the emptiness of things, but at the same time as seeing the emptiness of things, the Buddha also sees the conventional existence of things. So only a Buddha can do that. Only a Buddha can see both at the same time, both levels of truth. The ultimate truth, emptiness, simultaneously see the conventional truth, the dependent arising nature of things. So that's ultimately what we want to achieve, that state of mind. It's aware of both truths simultaneously. In a way you could say in the world, seeing the world, knowing everything that's going on, but at the same time out of the world in the sense of understanding that it's all empty, and therefore you're not attached to anything, you're not averse to anything, you don't have any kind of negative emotional reactions to anything. So you're there out of compassion for other beings, helping all the beings, but at the same time not there in the sense that you're not involved in the painful, distorting aspects of the world.
Is that the wisdom wing developing? In Buddhism, one talks about the wisdom wing. When you see.
You mean the two wings?
Yeah.
Yeah, wisdom. The wisdom wing is emptiness, seeing the empty nature of things, the ultimate truth, the ultimate reality of things, and then the other wing is compassion. We need both.
Yes. Thank you.
One last question.
I have two.
You have to say
But I
one.
start with one and we'll see what happens. But I was thinking for the space, if you have this chair, then I remove it, then somehow there is space there. So it seems there was a cause to create the space, which was sort of to remove the chair.
But even before you remove the chair, is there a space there?
Not like where the chair is. Or like between
But if
the
there
atoms.
wasn't space there, how could the chair be there?
There was there's the potential to have something somewhere. That kind of space, or also field space, is that space referred to?
Yeah, space is a tricky thing. I don't,
Space is not vacuum. in that way.
well, there's actually different kinds of space. One kind of space is called uncompounded space, meaning that it's permanent, not impermanent. It doesn't come from causes and conditions. So there is a permanent, uncompounded space. And then there's another kind of space which is said to be compounded space, like impermanent space. And we can see that kind of space. I was thinking maybe an example is when you're trying to park your car. You have to find a parking space. So you're driving around, oh, there's a space. So maybe that's the impermanent kind of space, the kind of space we can see. Whereas the other kind of space, that uncompounded, meaning permanent space, is not visible. It's not something we can see with our eyes. It's a phenomenon we can only know with our mind, a mental object. So it's something more abstract. I think of it as more abstract. That's the permanent space. Anyway. So how about if we stop here? But before we do, let's take a few minutes to dedicate the positive energy that we have created, the merit we have created over this few days. So we spent quite a bit of time and energy, because it does take energy to focus on this subject, which is not easy at all. So it is quite demanding, quite difficult to even try to listen and think about and meditate on this subject. So it's good if we feel good about what we've done. Feel a sense of joy, a sense of satisfaction that we have spent our time in this way, because this is something good for us. Because it will help us get closer to enlightenment, help us to be free of our suffering and our problems, help us to make our mind more and more positive. And in that way, this is helpful for others as well. Because when we can have more positive aspects of our mind, more love and compassion, and less negative attitudes like anger and hatred, then we can be more helpful to others right now in our life. So what we've learned here over this weekend, I'm sure will be helpful in our lives, in our relationships, in our interactions with others, helping us to be more kind and compassionate and less likely to cause problems for others. And also, because it's helping us get closer to enlightenment, that means it's helping us get closer to the time when we'll be able to really help others, help them to also follow the path and reach enlightenment. We try to recognize that what we've done here is helpful for us and helpful for others, both now, in this life, and also in a long-term sense, helping us get closer to enlightenment. So feel a sense of joy or rejoicing in the way we've spent our time. And then if we dedicate this merit or positive energy, then that makes it even more beneficial, more powerful, increases the merit, increases the positive energy. So the best dedication is to share it with others, with all living beings, if you can feel that way. So we can think, may this positive energy we've created be beneficial, not only to myself, but to everyone else, all living beings. Be helpful for us now to have more peace and happiness and less suffering, and may it help us in the long run, in the future, to have more and more happiness and follow the spiritual path and eventually attain liberation from suffering and eventually attain enlightenment, the state of a Buddha. So dedicate this positive energy to those goals. So thank you. Thank you very much for coming and making this possible, and also thanks to all the people who organized this, who